I'm studying economics. And when I do that, the case just really is clear that socialism is going to yield better economic productivity. Almost all of them are willing to admit that liberalism, free markets, capitalism is going to be more economically productive. But that doesn't convert them to any sort of free market liberalism. Right? They're willing to say, yeah, there's all this economics-y stuff, but there's something more important than that. And what is that? They also don't say, well, I really have done a lot of historical studies, right? We're looking at different kinds of social systems, and the historical record shows that socialism is obviously superior. They often don't know very much about economics or history. The same thing comes up when you talk about politics, comparative governance, and so on, concentrations of power, abuses, right, that can arise there, the horrible track records, and so on. It's not out of that. What they always say, I've never had a single socialist say something different than, I am a socialist because I think it is moral. It is good. It is ethical. And I believe that free markets and capitalism, neoliberalism, whatever you want to call it, is bad, immoral, exploitative, evil, wicked, despite its material accomplishments in various realms and so forth. So, from their perspective, the morality is most important. That's not to say that we don't have lots of good moral arguments to make, but we don't articulate them very clearly, and I would also say as a philosopher, we don't really have a coherent understanding of what the ethical underpinnings are. So the whole point of my talk today is going to be, this is what we need to think about more. Go ahead. Jack, you have a question?
I was just going to add, one thing I certainly hear the most from socialists is the word greedy.
Yes, sure, and that's a moral concept, right, about a certain kind of motivation. Okay, so, we're often like to do comparisons, East Germany, West Germany, North Korea, South Korea, and so on. So I want to just illustrate this point by means of maybe a fresh example to you. I want to focus on these two countries here, Zimbabwe and Botswana, two landlocked South African, Southern African type nations. And so, interestingly, they're both about the same size. They're both geographically located about the same natural resources, broadly the same history, same mix of ethnicities, religions, right, and colonial experience, and so on. But those two countries are unbelievably different, right, in a way that we like. So we start looking at data, and one of the great things about your generation is computer-powered software, so we can have access to quantitative data. So these are all of the countries in the world. Each circle is a country. They're color-coded by part of the world. Americas are green. Red is the Asian. The bluish ones down here are African nations. I don't know, what would Martha Stewart call that kind of, I don't know, pumpkin yellow color? Those are the European nations and so on. And what we have along the bottom is distribution, an array on the x-axis by income. So this starts at 0, 1,000, it's a log scale, so it doubles right, at each point here. So this goes 2,000, 4,000, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128,000. That's average income per person, and also there's a purchasing power parity equivalent put in there. So what can you actually buy with your money, as well as how much is being produced. So we are arraying all of the nations from poorest to richest nations along the world. The vertical axis is health, and the proxy here, or the measure that's used, is life expectancy at birth, 50 years, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, and so on. So, one of the interesting things that we see is that there's a correlation from poor, not living very long, all the way up to very rich, living a long time. And this is beautiful data. We also find the American nations, United States, Canada, I always have to put a plug in from Canada because that's where I'm from. It's up there as well, partly obscured. There's a big gap, though, between the North American nations and the Latin American nations, which are all tending to be scattered right in here. Western European nations, all up there. Eastern European nations, like hanging over here. Asian nations, and then, unfortunately, many of the African nations. So, we look at this data, and it's beautiful data for making our case. We say, look, why are some countries so rich and people live so long? Why is it never the case that you find there are some really poor countries where people live a long time? Or why is it never the case that you've got some really rich countries but people just don't live very long by living in those countries? So, money matters if we're concerned with wealth and all the good things that wealth can buy. And so the important thing then becomes an economic argument that we need to 2008, and then we start to argue about the economics and the kind of governance institutions that are going to support that. So, the examples that I want to get to are, I don't know if you can spot them, where are Botswana and where is Zimbabwe? Those two countries I want to get to. You move first, go ahead.
I had a question.
Yes.
Would you say that China's elevation of the list is indicative of their exodus from their communist policy?
China?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So this is interesting. This is data from 2014. If you look at China in 1990, China is about where India was. So that, that's a beautiful success story, a limited success story. So in one generation, to take 1.3 billion people from here up to there, right? Why did they do that? And there are some modest liberalizations that have gone on in China. And you can make the same case about India. India, almost 2 generations ago now, India was down here. Take 1.1 billion people right there, also an accomplishment, some liberalization, and it's obvious that that's what was happening. There's a hand over here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Botswana is right under Mexico.
Yes, good. So here's Botswana, yes, right there.
And Zimbabwe.
And Zimbabwe, right, is down here. That's what my next slide is about with my drawing skills. Right, here's Zimbabwe. So average life expectancy right around 60. Average income per person is below $2,000 per year. 2 generations ago, Zimbabwe, or before it became Zimbabwe, was referred to the jewel of southern Africa because it was so prosperous and awesome by African standards. Terrible story of decline. Botswana is really one of the outliers for all of the sub-Saharan African nations. It's way up there. Average income is, this year I looked it up, over $18,000 per person. So it's over 9 times as rich as Zimbabwe. And then life expectancy, an additional 17 years. So if you think of wealth in terms of how much actual time do you have, it's your most important resource, your lifespan essentially that extra amount of time. Okay. So what then explains the differences between these two nations? Similar history, similar geography, and actually Botswana is 70% Kalahari Desert, so natural resources stock, not that great, and so forth. And there's our kind of story that is told. It's more market-friendly, curiously civil rights, and the kinds of governance that we take for granted. So this is a former British colony. When they achieved independence, they by and large kept British institutions. Zimbabwe was also a former British colony. When the British left, they got their institutions. They went with revolutionary Marxist socialism, and the results speak for themselves. Now, that's great to make those kinds of arguments, but what are we saying when we make a comparison like that? So these are 2 pictures from Zimbabwe. Are we saying the thing that's really bad about Zimbabwe, the thing that's the moral front, is that it keeps its people poor? And so what it does is keep people like this. Or are we saying that what's wrong with Zimbabwe, right, is what happens in this case as a representative here? You say the wrong thing, you publish the wrong kind of blog post, you criticize the government, you try to organize a protest, you start the wrong kind of business, the police come and hit you with sticks. So it's a violation of people's freedoms. And we have 2 important values here, wealth and freedom. Well, which one are we about? What's the relationship between them? Are we saying, well, the reason maybe why people are so poor is that they don't have freedom? But we're just then seeing freedom as a means to an end. We want people to be free so that they'll do all kinds of stuff and they become rich. And that's what we want. Rich is the ultimate moral standard that we're achieving. Or are we saying, no, really, what we want is this person not to be poor, but then if she's poor and we have the right kind of system, then show her the freedom and the power to live the good kind of life. So is it that the wealth is a means to an end, or that the freedom is a means to an end? And we're not often clear what we mean, right, by our system being good when we talk that way. So why is freedom good? And that's just one puzzle. My argument today is titled "What the Case Says for Capitalism," because it's interesting. When you start to look at the kinds of arguments we use, we have a lot of them, all of them about values, and we tend to underplay them. And so I want to walk through some of the more important ones to give you a sense of what the terrain is, and that will guide our thinking. So, we're talking about liberalism, right, in the broad sense. I know for you Americans who use the word liberal very weirdly. Very weird. The only place in the world where liberal doesn't mean liberal, I think, means kind of the opposite of every liberal is. Right, but classical liberal then, for you guys, or some sort of overall society where we have this network of things. We have the rule of law, government is limited in power, we have democratic institutions, market-friendly, and so on. So this is what we mean by a liberal society in the classical sense. What makes that good? Right. So one kind of argument just is to say, well, liberal institutions mean that people have more freedom as individuals. We take individual freedom very seriously, and all by itself, that makes those countries good. Slavery is a moral abomination. Serfdom, right, second-class citizen or third-class citizen for women or various other kinds of people, those are all immoral things. Baked into being a human is being a free agent. We think for ourselves, we formulate our own values, our own goals, we take responsibility for freely initiating our course in life. That's what it is to be a good human being, a society that respects each individual's ability to do that. That all by itself is a moral society, and that's why classical liberal societies are good. Other social systems, to the extent that they don't do that, those are bad social systems. But sometimes we go on and say, well, the freedom is nice, but what we're really interested in is the things that come from good freedom. So we might say the thing, well, if we have liberal institutions, people are freer, but one of the things that means is people are free to work on projects and keep the fruits of their labor. So property rights, we take those very seriously. You make something, you get to keep it. You get to decide right what you do. And then we say that means people are going to be more willing to work hard. If I know that I am free to produce and keep the results of my production, then I'm more likely to work hard than if I don't think that that is going to be the case. And that means that that society is going to have a lot more material wealth. Now notice what we're saying is freedom is not necessarily all by itself good, but it's good because it incentivizes people a certain way, which leads them to act a certain way, which leads to certain material results that we can measure out there. That is what makes it good. You get a wealthier society. And that's a good argument. It's a different argument. Now we might say, well, you know, why freedom is good is not so much that people are willing to work hard. The important thing is that we work smart. Because we're not oxen. Oxen work very hard. Like, we're smart. We have a big brain. And the most important asset that we have is knowledge. But in a society, we have millions and millions of people with lots and lots of knowledge. And the question is, how are we going to get your knowledge working with my knowledge so that we can work together and work really smart and produce society? So one of the arguments we make is that free societies are really good at entrepreneurial startups, formulating larger businesses and corporations, developing abstract institutions like financial markets, stock markets, and so forth, in which millions of people who know lots and lots of stuff find ways to work together with each other to mutual benefit. And they're not necessarily working physically hard, right, in the way that we typically think of people working hard. So we develop all sorts of win-win trade networks in liberal societies, and that's why we're so much wealthier. Okay, so it's good because we work hard, it's good because we work smart, both of those make us wealthy. Different kind of argument, though, is to say, well, the important thing about freedom is that we're different. Of course, we're all human beings, but people have their own ideas, their own thinking styles, their own preferences. And if you have a free society, you can expect that there's lots of individuality. And of course, liberal societies encourage people to be their own person and to do things like their own way and give them lots of freedom to do so. So we can expect there to be a lot more diversity and a lot more individuality in these societies. And that means we're going to get a lot more creativity compared to societies that encourage people to think the same thing, do the same thing, conform, compromise, and so forth. Liberal societies say, do your own thing, your own way, and so on. So we're going to get a lot more creativity in these kinds of society, and it's the creativity that's going to spark lots of innovation, and innovation is the thing that really is the driver of wealth. So, three kinds of wealth right now. Is it because we work harder, we work smarter, or because we work more creatively? Which value? Working smart, working hard, working creatively as the most important one, or perhaps all of them as well. So we have a network of arguments so far. Let's say here we're focusing on economic productivity and trying to say why it is that we think liberal societies, or classically liberal societies, are economically more productive than tribal, fascist, communist, whatever societies, and so on. And this is the kind of set arguments we make. But then we might say, maybe it's not so much a matter of just producing all of this wealth and being economically productive, but who gets all the money? How is the wealth distributed? There's the production side, there's the distribution side. And we also make arguments about how the wealth gets spread around in a society. One of the arguments we make is material wealth in a society, if you live in an overall richer society, everybody is made better off by that. The metaphors like a rising tide lifts all boats. So just by being born in Arizona, you're almost automatically going to be richer than somebody born in Sonora, 50 miles on the other side of the border. Different situation. So everybody's better off being born in the one place compared to the other. Or we might say it's not everybody who's going to be better off, but the majority of people, maybe the large majority of people are going to be better off in a free market liberal society. Or we might say it's the average person, or the common person, whoever our stereotypical representative member of society is, that person is better off in this kind of society. But again, we need to think, are we aiming to make everyone better off? The majority? The common person? What about the poor? Sometimes we say, well, I'm not actually so worried about the average person. But we are especially worried about the poor. And what it is to be a moral person especially is to be concerned with helping the poor get out of their situation. And then we will make arguments to say, well, the poor are going to be a lot better off. What poor people need is a job. If you have a prosperous economy, there'll be lots of jobs, and so you'll be more likely to get the kind of job you need to support your family. Or these societies encourage entrepreneurship. Maybe you don't want to work for someone else, but if you're poor and you're free, you've got an idea, some energy, you can start your own business. And that's a lot easier in liberal free market societies compared to other people. So we might make the argument then that the poor especially are going to be better off as a result of our society. We'll also make arguments about, well, let's focus a lot on the market and the for-profit sector. What about people who can't work? Or what about some parts of our culture that aren't necessarily for-profit amenable, like nonprofit institutions, philanthropical organizations? And the argument we make is, well, you want a lot of philanthropy. First, you want to have a rich society, so there's all the extra cash floating around to go to these philanthropic organizations, certain kinds of hospitals, disaster relief, working with people who have handicaps that prevent them from working, and so on. So as a result of the philanthropy, the weakest members in your society, however you define those, are also going to be a lot better off. You know, to put it bluntly, if you're going to be handicapped, you want to be handicapped in a rich society. That's your best option for getting the kind of life that's possible. But we also might then say, well, here we're talking about the average person, here we're talking about the poor, the weaker people, but what about the really special people? We think one of the things that's great about our society is that we support, for example, a huge amount of science and engineering research. You know, there's people with off-the-charts IQs who make all of these discoveries and manufacture all of these awesome gadgets that we love and take for granted, and so on. How many multi-million-dollar research labs do we have in the United States, in Canada, and in the rich parts of the world? And you're going to get a lot more people being able to use that awesome brain power if you are a person in a rich society. But what about other kinds of awesome people? Athletes who need specialized training, specialized nutrition, specialized coaching, money to be able to engage in travel, to go to national and international events. Those are all big ticket items. You're going to get more awesome athletics. What about musicians, touring bands? Think about how much money it takes to put an orchestra, 60 instruments and all of the handlers and so forth, and send them on a world tour. You're going to get a lot more awesome music going on, and a lot more people able to support themselves by making awesome music and producing it if you're in a free society. So, if that's what you're interested in, say the kind of people who elevate us, make us better people, give us awe-inspiring things that make life worth living. That's what we want, and our kind of society is going to do that for us. Okay, so this is the distribution kind of argument. Notice we got a whole bunch of standards as a result a lot of values that we are putting on the table here. And now we're talking a lot about money. But how important is money? You know, when we get philosophical, we say, you know, money is really important. I love money. I would like to have more money, but money is not the only value. There are other important things in life. And what are some of those other important things in life? And those connect with our kind of society. Then we start saying things, well, happiness. The relationship between money and happiness, that's a very interesting issue. But what makes people happy? Now we're back in philosophy class, right? And our answer is something like, well, when I'm happiest is when I'm doing something that I love, instead of something that my dad is making me do, or the teachers have given this assignment, or I'm following the orders, right, of the boss. So then we're getting back to autonomy, self-regulation, self-commitment. That seems to be a necessary component. People are happiest when they are able to wear the clothes they want, hang out with people they want to, pursue their musical interests right for themselves, make their own decisions about religion, politics, and so on. So society, then, that encourages exactly that. Be yourself, find out who you are, and create yourself into the kind of person that you want to be. You're going to have more happy people compared to societies that encourage conformity, going along with the group, following orders, etc. So, happiness, you're going to get more of that. Interesting bliss. Societies are more interesting. We might make the argument here, the news, kind of John Stuart Mill argument actually. What's interesting about societies you travel around is you want to meet different people doing different sorts of things, and you're going to get more of that in societies that encourage people to be free and individualistic. I don't know how much international travel you do. It is kind of fun to go to a new place, but I tell you, in some parts of the world you go to, you can travel 1,000 miles and everything is basically the same. Some people are interesting as individuals, but you know, you've seen one such city, one such village, you've basically seen them all. It's just a matter of repetition. You travel around in the rich, free places of the world, you get a lot more variety, a lot more culture, a lot more interesting stuff that's going on, and that's what we want. Interesting people doing interesting things. Tolerance. If you're going to have a society that isn't everybody at each other's throats, enforcing conformity on each other, and spilling over into physical violence, individuality historically seems to be the major bulwark part of that. If you believe, as a matter of moral principle, that it's important to respect each person's right to think for themselves, make their own decisions, arrange their own lives as they see fit, you're going to have less intolerance of the kind that has caused huge problems in societies across history. So, if we think tolerance is a top value, tolerance for sexual lifestyles or religious lifestyles, then you want liberal societies in our sense. So now we're talking tolerance, happiness, some sort of interesting aesthetic criteria, and those are not obviously about economics or money. Now we're getting into psychology. We are getting into aesthetics. We're getting into matters of moral values like tolerance and status. Big ones today are sexism and racism. The kind of arguments that we make is to say, well, again, if you look historically, the least racist, the least sexist societies are almost always liberal individualistic ones. And the kind of arguments we make were various ones, but one is going to be, let's take the profit motive. Right? I will be the representative racist here, for example. Suppose I'm a racist. Suppose that for whatever reason I don't like brown people. But I'm hired. And two people apply. Right? There's a white person and there's a brown person. And the brown person was an A- student at university. The white guy was a C student at university. Whom do I want to hire? Well, the racist in me wants to hire the white guy. I said, I can't work with the brown person because I'm a racist. But the profit-seeking businessman in me is going to lead me to say, I want to hire the brown guy. The student is more likely to be someone who's going to generate productivity in my company. I'm going to make more money by hiring that person. That's not necessarily that it's going to override my racism, but the profit motive gives people an incentive to overlook stupid racist attitudes that they have. And the more you encourage the profit motive, and the more you have people when they interact with each other, then the less racism you're going to have. So I will hire the brown guy. Oh, you know, brown people aren't so bad. My racist attitudes decline a little bit. And then that starts to become the social norm. Sexist variations on that. I don't know, suppose I'm doing international business and I say, oh, I don't want to deal with women because I'm just a traditional white sexist and so on. Or some woman calls me up, British accent, or whatever, and says, yes, I'd like to order $100,000 of your machine parts. And I say, you're a woman, slam the phone. I don't want your $100,000 away. Or I might say, whoa, $100,000? Yeah, I have to talk to a woman. Okay. Maybe that will go that way. So that's the argument, right, that we make, and it does seem to be, there's lots of historical evidence that we have for this, right, that if you want to find where there are the least sexist attitudes, look in the freer individualistic nations. Look where there's the least amount of racism, same answer there. So how about peace? Right? Another value. It's an important one as well. We want to live in a peaceful world. Well, do free market capitalist nations go to war with each other? Think of Canada and the United States. How many wars have there been between the United States and Canada? Well, I guess most of them war. And actually the answer is 0. So it wasn't Canada then. 1812, right? So we're going to play that one on British. Yeah. When was the last time there was a war between the French and the British? This is interesting.
100 years war?
Napoleon. Yeah, so that's over 200 years ago. Before then, the entire history of France and Britain is, we hate those guys and let's fight. As soon as they became much more liberal, much more individualistic, much more free market, they started trading with each other. And that provides them a commoner set of values, but also ones that disincentivize war. And it's obvious, right, if you take perspective here. If I am, yes, an international business person, and I've got my vendors, right, in these countries over here, and my customers over in these countries, I don't want to go with war with those countries, because then my supplies are going to be cut off, my customers are going to be cut off, it's going to cause me huge losses. So I have an incentive, whatever my political influence is, to keep things peaceful and so on. So if we then have lots and lots of international business going on, people's profit motive in this case, and all of these win-win networks that we form are going to keep people more peaceful. And the social science does bear this out. If you look at all the wars that are going on, there's lots and lots of wars going on. Lots of them, and actually the large majority of them, are very illiberal, anti-market friendly nations. They're almost always fighting with each other. Right? All of the wars going on around the world. A minority of them are countries like ours, basically more classically liberal institutions, but fighting against more authoritarian, communitarian types of nations around the world. So there's that. Now, the big name thinkers, right, whom we all look up to and learn from, right? I don't have any original arguments here. So my contribution is just putting all these arguments together into what I think is a pretty flow chart. The flow chart is mine. All of the arguments come from other people. So Rand is a demon for emphasizing this point here, that the most important thing is freedom as a human right that is built into the human condition, and all by itself, societies that respect those rights, irrespective, might be a bit strong, the consequences are moral society. So here's a quotation here. The moral justification of capitalism does not lie in the ultimate claim that it represents the best way to achieve the common good, whatever it is, according to her. It's true that it does, so all of these things, we're all better off as a result of capitalism, but that's a secondary concept. Moral justification is the only system consonant with man's rational nature. What that means is we are rational beings. We have a mind, but our minds operate volition. We have to choose to operate. We have to think for ourselves. We have to put our actions in. That's what it is to be a human being. Any system that does not, as a matter of right, respect that in each and every individual dehumanizes people. And that's a moral abomination. Milton Friedman, most famous, right, for emphasizing the incentive of the profit motive from a classic work of his in the 1960s, contrasting the incentive of reward, profit motive, with compulsion. You might substitute compulsion for the incentive of reward, as command economies do. I doubt you could. You can shuffle inanimate objects around. You can compel individuals to be at certain places at certain times, but you can hardly compel individuals to put forth their best efforts. So, we are free agents, and we have to be incentivized, and profit is a good incentivizing agency, so a society that encourages that is going to then be a good society. So if you're interested in the result. But notice he's making this economic point about incentivization. Mises and Hayek, giants for emphasizing the knowledge issue here about how institutions voluntarily arise, and often spontaneously, and those institutions make us all better off. A system in which the knowledge of the relevant facts is dispersed among many people. It's not the case that there's 3 or 4 people in the society who are very smart and who have all the knowledge they need to organize and run a society. It's just not the way it is. There are millions of people, we all know stuff, we have to get that knowledge working with it, and that's exactly what markets do. This is from this classic piece in 1945. Joseph Schumpeter, most famous, another Austrian economist, we're talking about the perennial gale of creative destruction, valorizing that creative entrepreneurism that is built then into society. Mises tends to hang out in this territory when he's making his arguments. For example, liberalism, in his sense of liberalism, this is from his 1927 classic book, has always had in view the good of the whole. So that's the moral standard. What's good for the whole? Not that of any special group. It was this that the English utilitarians meant to express in their famous formula, which he agrees with, the greatest happiness for the greatest number. So that's what we should be striving for. And again, that's a different moral standard. Leading part libertarians tend to hang out in this territory here, saying, yeah, all of these other things might go good, but if we're interested in morality or ethics, this is what makes something good. Moral justification of our institutions depends on how well these institutions serve the interests of the poor and the least advantaged. So this is only a partial list here, but when we think, liberal capitalism, free markets, liberty society is a good thing, what do we mean when we say that? And I've run through today's 13 arguments. This is not the entire book. Is it about freedom? Is it about happiness? Greatest happiness is the greatest number? Am I supposed to stop? Is that
No, it's only 10 minutes.
Oh, 10 minutes, thank you. I feel relieved. Is it about happiness? If so, what do we mean by that? Or do we just mean the greatest happiness, the greatest number? What does that mean? What's achievable? Prosperity, helping the poor? Is tolerance our top value? Relationship between liberty and equality? What do we mean by that? Peace, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where we need to do our thinking. Within our movement, we have really good arguments on all of these points, but we sound confused when we talk to people outside of our movement because we jump around a lot. And the ones that we think are really important, often people on other sides of political fences, they might think these are nice, but they might be secondary or tertiary. They have a different list of values that they think are more important. And you might make these arguments wonderfully and convince them that it violates this other moral principle that I think is more important, so I'm still opposed to capitalism, and we need to know about that as well. Now, this about ethics and values and making an idealistic case for liberty is the point I'm insisting on today. James Buchanan, Nobel Prize winner in economics, this is from a Wall Street Journal piece he published 16 years ago, saying, why have we been losing so many policy debates, so many ideological debates, losing control of various institutions and so on, even though history seems to be on our side, economics seems to be on our side, and political governance people, the arguments that they're making seem to be on our side. And his argument was that we lost the ethics debate. We true liberals are failing to save the soul of classical liberalism. Books and ideas are not sufficient to ensure the viability of our philosophy. The problem lies in presenting the ideal. And we don't come across as idealistic, as concerned with ethics and morality. Classical liberalism cannot secure sufficient public acceptability when its local adherents are limited to, does it work Right? Yeah, your system is really beautiful and noble and ideal. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work. So therefore, you should come over to our side. Not going to attract anybody. A vision and ideal is necessary. And so forth. People need something to yearn, struggle for. If the liberal ideal is not there, there will be a vacuum and other ideas will supplant it, and that's exactly what has happened. Classical liberals have failed in their understanding of this dynamic. Now, that's our generation. Right? We have failed. You're the young people. That's your job. Supply that vision, supply that ideal. Make it dynamic, compelling, attractive. Let me give you some examples of the kind of people. As much as I love Hayek and I've learned from him, this is Hayek assessing his contributions to say, this is why I am a free market capitalist. Well, I studied a lot of economics, and what I had done had often seemed to be more to point out barriers to further advance on paths chosen by others. And by the others, he means the Marxists and the neo-Marxists and the various kinds of democratic socialists and the fascists and the national socialists. Early part of the 20th century, they were the dynamic idealists coming up with fresh proposals, fresh policies, fresh ways of doing government. And they were attracting millions and millions of young people, right, to those ideals. And along come Mises and Hayek, and they say, oh, sorry, that one won't work. That one won't work. It won't work. Failure, you're just going to have economic right results. That's the response. Now, he's right, but how effective is that as a then to supply new ideas which open the path to further development. I don't have any new ideas. I'm not talking about further development. All I'm doing is shooting down other people's new ideas and their development. That's my strategy. Hayek again, if our conclusions on the merits of planning are essentially negative, central planning, socialist planning, fascist planning, whatever you want to call it, are negative. Always going to fail, always going to reap negative results. This is certainly no cause for satisfaction. Nothing could do more than to relieve the unmitigated gloom with which the economists today must look at the future of the world, and if it could be shown that there is a possible and practicable way to overcome planning's difficulty. So in this very gloomy situation, wouldn't it be wonderful if socialism could work? That'd be so awesome. But it can't. So I guess free market capitalism. That's what Buchanan is worried about. We don't have, or we didn't have an ideal vision. Mises, reflecting on arguments against slavery. What's wrong with slavery? And he's noticing, he's not necessarily, yes, agreeing with his position, he's saying, among his circle of people, you try to argue with them, slavery is just disgusting, evil, and moral abomination, a stain, and they'll kind of nod and say, yes, I agree with you. But that doesn't convince them. What does convince them? He says there's only one argument that can and did refute all the others in that case, namely that free labor is incomparably more productive than slave. That's true. Free labor is more economically productive. But that's not an idealistic moral argument that we are making. Now, I want to just say we've talked a lot about money and the economy, and I've only got 4 minutes left. 2 examples. Suppose we're not talking about money, though. There's a lot of arguments, they take a lot of time. But one way to test that is to say, yes, we run through all of these arguments about peace and toleration and equality and productivity, distribution of wealth, and so on, in terms of money. But suppose the money is part of what we are talking about when we're talking about a free society. We also want people to have a free life in their artistic pursuits, in their musical pursuits, in their friendships, in their families, in their religion, in their political, and so forth. It's a full, free life that we are interested in, and the economic element is focusing on money, an important argument. How do all of those arguments that I ran through stack up if we try other domains in human life? So suppose we talk about sex. You're all young people, so I don't need to define any terms. What makes a free society with respect to your sex life a good society? Why do we think people should be free in this area? And we can't say, well, maybe people shouldn't be free. We can have traditional tribalist approaches where I'm the dad, I choose your sex partner for you. Marry you off and off you go. That could work, right? How do we know that really having a free market in sex, where people can choose their own partners and decide whether to have sex with people or not, whether to get married, right? How do we know that that's better than a society in which the father, perhaps in consultation with the mother, chooses first? Or maybe it would be better if we had a society in which everybody had equal access to sex. After all, equality is very important. Maybe that would be better. Right? And we have this kind of maldistribution of sexual access going on right now. Or, how do we know that it's not better than a society, after all? Sex is tied to reproduction, and we want human beings to be healthy and so forth. But if we just let people have sex with whomever they want, we don't get the best people having sex with the best people, so we don't necessarily get the best people being born. That maybe if we had things a little more organized and with more quality standards and pairing by a central government, we would get better results. So, we have all the politics, right, about sexuality and all those arguments out there and historically instantiated. But when we are making the case for, I want to do my own thing when it comes to this area in life. Why is that best? Why is that a matter of moral principle? Why should that be a matter of political right? And then which of the arguments is going to work there? Or if we did the same thing, say, for religion. We want good religion, wherever we think good religion is. Will a liberal regime make us more religious, less religious, better at our religion, whatever we think that is? Will we have more equal distribution of religion? Will poor people have better access to religion?